How to make the most out of Claude Code. Hello friends, today I want to share with you a few updates regarding the way I use Claude Code. I haven't uploaded a video in the last 2 weeks or so because I was very deep into building, and while I was building a lot. I optimized my whole workflow of generating code and building with Claude Code, and I wanted to share it with you guys. A lot of the principles are principles that we already discussed in previous videos, but I'm operating under the assumptions that some of you might be new to the channel, so I'm just going to cover everything, not necessarily in depth, because I want you to mess around with the stuff, but it's mostly about understanding the principles, as there is the famous quote by, I think it's attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, that he says that there are many methods, but the principles are few, and the person who understands the principles, he's the person that eventually will win. Obviously, this is me paraphrasing. I don't remember the quote word for word, but in general, I think understanding the principles is what is important over here. And what you don't understand in terms of the tactics and the methods, you can always ask the LLM to assist you. Now, the first thing that I've noticed and has been very helpful for me in terms of building faster and building better in terms of quality is, first of all, understanding the whole context of the project. Now, every project contains of the following. We have the code base. We probably have the GitHub repository. We have the front end, which can be accessed via obviously the front end, and also we have the console, meaning the dev tools. For those of you who don't know, you should know, but I'm referring to this stuff: console, network, etc. We have the backend logs, we have the database, and we have the project management tool. Whether I'm using a lot of GitHub issues, whether you're using Jira, Linear, or whatever. Now, what mostly slows down the process of building and also hinders quality is, first of all, on one hand, when you have too much context. This is a bad thing, because eventually, if you have too much context, the LLM cannot understand what's going on. So you need to compact the context and make sure that the context is precise. So this is one option, having too much context. But the other option is not having enough context. So it's very important that we find like the silver lining between giving sufficient context but not giving too much context, and obviously not giving too little context. Now, why is this important? Because initially, the way that we were supposed to connect or provide context, if we look at the evolution of vibe coding or building with LLMs, initially we used the chat UI, we copied and pasted everything into the chat UI, we got the snippet of code, and we pasted it in VS Code or Windsurf or whatever. This was the first phase. Then we started using the AI coding assistants with auto completions, or using a terminal, or using Windsurf or Cursor to write the whole chunk of code. And these days we are using Claude Code, most of us. People who did advanced with technology are using Claude Code. But we want to connect as much context as possible. So initially, not initially, but later on, Anthropic proposed the solution of having MCPs. So MCPs were kind of like, it's a layer of connecting LLMs to endpoints. It's not exactly like REST API, but you can consider it as some form of a very flexible API. And we had many MCPs connected to different elements in the application. MCP for connecting to your GitHub, MCP for connecting to your project management tool, etc. These days we see there is a decline. I think, at least based on my observation, there is a decline in usage of MCPs because they have many holes in the architecture or in the whole idea of MCPs. Some people have many objections to using it, and I also feel that they are not necessarily so valuable. The only MCPs that I'm using are Context7, which basically is an MCP that basically has all many of very, very important frameworks and libraries. It basically has the documentation of all of them, the most updated documentation, and then you can very easily connect to Context7 and get the updated documentation. So for example, let's say I'm building with Next.js and they have released a new version, and suddenly I have a syntax error, and this might be because they introduced a breaking change that isn't backwards compatible. And using Context7, I can read the new documentation and understand what do I need to fix. So basically Context7 allows us to stay on top of our game and be connected. Let's see how they are exactly framing this Context7. Up-to-date documentation for LLMs and code, an AI coding assistant. Yeah, this is basically it. So Context7, and I use the Playwright MCP, which I will discuss this in a moment. Anyway, so I'm not using too much of MCPs, but the point of this part of the presentation is that I started using CLI heavily and connecting to as many tools as possible in my project. Now, how does this look like? I have a few projects that I'm working on. Some are in Railway, some in Vercel. So what I'm doing, I'm using Claude Code in Windsurf, although this isn't crucial anymore, just to see the files. Although I rarely look at them. I know this might be unprofessional, but I rarely look at them. And Claude Code is connected via CLI connected to Railway. So it pulls the logs. It is connected to GitHub. So it pulls issues, pulls actions, etc. You can also pull, cards. If you have I used to have a Kanban with the project management in GitHub, so it pulled also the cards, milestones, etc. It is connected connected to my DB, Postgres SQL, and it is also connected. It is also connected using Playwright MCP to the front end. So it gives us the console. So basically, now when I have an issue, I have my Claude Code, my agent, has access to the whole infrastructure of the project. So first of all, if we have an error in staging or in production, I ask it, use Railway, pull the logs. So it reads the logs. It can also obviously also connect to the DB. And if there is an issue on the front end, I'm using Playwright MCP. It goes to my local deployment, or if it's in a staging, and it can actually read the console and also take a screenshot, because the Playwright MCP, it takes screenshots of your browser, and then it has all the context. So basically this way we gather all the context and put it into Claude Code without copying and pasting, without wasting a lot of time on doing the manual work into basically consolidating the context for Claude Code. So first principle is have as many aspects of your project connected to Claude Code. Now, obviously there is the downside of you need to provide API keys. I'm not sure if it's the best practice to provide API keys. I haven't found a useful workaround for this. but this is something that I'm willing to risk at the moment, at least at certain points. But I find this very, very valuable. So connecting everything as much as possible via CLI. You need to install the specific CLI for each solution, for railway, VSL, or whatever, or connecting MCPs. So, but obviously, like I said, every time imagine all the moving parts in your project and try to see how can you take your agent and connect it to them directly without you needing to gather the data. So this is the first thing. Second thing that I wanted to discuss is the use of custom commands. So I already spoke about this a few videos ago, but I want to discuss this again. So first of all, I created a reinforce command. Basically what it does, it creates an adversarial agent, and that agent takes a look on all the code that we wrote since the last commit, and it looks for loopholes, for bugs or stuff that it can fix in the code base. And at the end, it produces a very sometimes detailed, sometimes not so detailed, but a very accurate report about what was done. Let me show you an example over here. So reinforcement summary, files reviewed. It's just a small project. So files reviewed, all these 4, issues found 7, issues fixed, iterations, it took 2 iterations, and status pass. So basically the reinforcement command in my settings, basically it takes, as I said, the code base, all the changes that we did, and it iterates, it fixes the code base in iteration until it is completely fixed. Sometimes it tells me, it asks me whether or not I would like to fix some stuff that might be negligible. So I just tell it if it should skip or pass. But this is very valuable. What I suggest, you don't need me to tell you what I have in my reinforcement command. All you need to do is go to Claude Code, ask it to build a custom command that is called reinforce. Next is debug. Debug command is something that I introduced recently. Basically what I tell it over here is, instead of telling Claude Code, go to railway logs, go to console, blah, 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 very long list of stuff that I want him to consolidate the data. So once I write the debug custom command, it knows that it should connect to the railway logs. It knows that it should open the browser and fetch the console and take a look at the code and understand what was the issue, and then start debugging the issue. So debug is very valuable. I started using it lately. Another thing that I'm using a lot is ask question. This isn't necessarily a custom command, but you can create a custom command. So if you've been using Claude Code recently, you might have noticed that Claude Code is asking you some clarifying questions. This is called, I think, the ask question tool or something like this. Now, why this is valuable? Because what you can do, you can use Claude Code to interview you, gather context from you, and based on this, it can build an element. So let's do a live example over here. I actually didn't intend to do this, but so this is a project that I basically built a tool that allows me to automate LinkedIn outreach and also unifies inboxes of multiple accounts, scheduled sending of DMs, etc., etc. Now let's assume that we want to add an aspect of cold email. So what I can do, I want to add, let's open the mic. Never mind. I want to add a section that will help me with enrichment of profiles. I'm not sure exactly how it will look like. Can you use the ask questions tool to ask me as many guiding questions as possible in order for us to build an accurate plan for this feature? So basically I'm triggering the ask question tool, which is a built-in tool by Anthropic, and you will see in a moment, hopefully it understands that it needs to trigger this tool, that is going to start asking me questions about this feature of enrichment of profiles. And then based on the questions, which I find them usually very valuable, we will plan the feature. So as you can see here, what additional data points do you want to enrich your lead profiles with? So email addresses, yes. Phone numbers, yes. Company data, yes. Social profiles, yes. Type something. No, that's enough. What data sources or APIs would you like to integrate for enrichment? So let's look up in their websites and use Google SERP. So it proposed using Apollo, Hunter.io, Clearbit, or LinkedIn only. I said, let's look up in their websites and use Google search engine results page. When should enrichment happen in your workflow? On scrape, on demand, before outreach, or schedule batch? All options. Let user pick. All options, let user pick. How should enriched data be displayed in dashboard? External lead card, separate profile model, new enrichment tab, inline inbox. I guess new enrichment tab. Okay, let's submit the answers. Okay, so you see it guided us and helped me think this through. Initially, I didn't even thought about some of these aspects. So it says user answered Claude's questions. Now it might introduce a plan, or it might introduce a few more questions. Yes, okay, few more questions. For website scraping, what specific data should be extracted from lead company websites? About pages, text stack detection. Okay, you get the gist. So the ask, let me go back to here. Okay, so the ask question tool, very valuable. Highly recommend that you check it out. Next, we have the skills, which is, I feel that everybody is talking about Claude skills lately. And I think it makes sense because skills are somewhat similar to custom commands, but they are more complex and they have, I think they are more complex and can be more valuable. I did a video a few weeks ago about the difference between custom commands and skills. I'm not going to elaborate now, but what I highly recommend that you do is start building skills. Use Claude Code, just understand what you would like to do. Imagine you have agents as if they are juniors that you just hired, that you want to teach them certain skills. So copywriting skill, LinkedIn post skill, video editing skill, whatever. And as soon as you write the skill, or you can use Claude Code to help you write the skill, you have that skill saved in your root folder or in a dedicated folder based on the project. So you can create skills for all your Claude Code projects or skills specific for a specific project. And then you can trigger the skill on demand. Now, from a mechanistic perspective, they are slightly different. And again, you should watch the other video that I did about this because I did like a side-by-side comparison. I think skills are a bit more complex. They're not necessarily harder to implement or get started because anyway, you're just going to use Claude Code for both of them. But for me, I don't use skills as often as the custom commands. I probably should. But you know, it's for different use cases. I use skills for a few things. but these are like dedicated workflows that are not part of a project. So for example, writing content, etc. So I use dedicated skills, or creating a presentation, I use a dedicated skill. Stuff like that, which is more like standalone, I use skills. Within like building projects, I use custom commands more often. Although, as I said, I'm not sure it's the right way to go. I probably need to use more skills, use skills even more as well during the building processes. Yeah, I guess that's it for today. So quick summary. I hope this was valuable. If it was, leave a comment below and a like. Obviously subscribe if you haven't. Let's do a quick summary. So first of all, I find it very important to share as much context as needed in your project. So connect all aspects of your application to Claude Code. Again, the downside and the risk is that you probably need to share secret keys, so take that into account. One thing I forgot to mention is if you, and this is also very valuable, it's actually in the custom commands. So we have the compact command, which is a built-in command by Anthropic. I think most people just forget to use the compact, and then Anthropic Claude Code is going to compact the conversation when necessary, and very often doesn't do it so precisely. So two things to take into account here. First of all, the to-do list doesn't get compacted, so it doesn't lose context. So if there is anything important, add it to the to-do list, because the to-do list that Claude Code generates is persistent. This is the first thing. The second thing is, if you want to compact, proactively, and you want Claude Code to focus only on specific aspects, so you can write the custom command compact and then guide him focus on the CSS styling guidelines. So as soon as I write this, even if we have like a very long conversation, maybe a lot of it was fluff, non-related ideation, stuff like this, whenever I add this argument to the command, basically what I'm telling Claude Code is to focus on the CSS styling guidelines and take this as the context post compacting. So this is very important and very valuable, which I highly recommend that you guys do. Going back to the summary, so we discussed adding as much as context as needed and connecting different tools in order to speed you up and provide more quality. Second thing is using custom commands, and we discussed the reinforce command, the debug command, and the ask questions tool. And now we discussed the compacting. And the last but not least is using as many skills as necessary, taking the time to really build a skill, because it can be very, very ROI positive later down the line. And obviously skills are can work across projects, and you can adjust them afterwards and optimize them. So just a good practice that whenever you start doing stuff more than once, you should create a dedicated skill for it. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, as I said. If you didn't already, join the No Fluff newsletter. Although I haven't published too often lately, I try to, let's see, it might be down now. Never mind, I will check in a moment. No, it's fine. I only publish when I find meaningful stuff. So if you're interested in AI related and automation related content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep on